Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to some of you, because I know it's evening, getting towards evening for some of you. I hope you can hear me and I hope you can see the screen. So this is Abigail speaking. So just to say, we have done a handbook for the annual reporting, and we also did a series of webinar trainings in September, but we felt it was important to maybe do one quick round of webinar today as the reporting deadline is approaching, mainly so that we can focus on taking your specific questions. So I have my colleague Anna here with me. Most of you or all of you know Anna. She's been responding to all of your emails coming in for this round of reporting. So the both of us will present. I'll present for a very brief time, and we'll hand over to Anna, who will go into a little bit more detail, and then we'll round up the webinar with a Q&A session. So we plan to present for about 15-20 minutes maximum, and because we basically want to leave the rest of the time open so that you can we can have enough time to take as many of your questions as possible. So I do hope you can hear us and you can see the screen. So I'll start the presentation now. So there are a number of reasons why we wanted to do this webinar. So as you can see, this is going to be the content of the session this morning. So first, we want to focus on a number of name changes that we made in the IMS. And then we want to run you through just a few key aspects of the annual reporting handbook. And then we want to do a quick run through of how to enter the data, specifically focusing on the quality of the data and focusing on some of the aspects that we know that is sometimes challenging. And then we obviously want to focus on the accuracy and the quality of the data entered. As you know from many webinars we've done before, we've always been reporting how the data is used. So the data is used for a number of purposes, and it is critical for us that as we move forward, we continue to ensure the accuracy and quality of the data in the IMS. And then just to remind you of the deadline, and then as I said earlier, we'll open up for a Q&A session. So some of you who have been using the IMS for the last 2 years may know that we had the work plan and the coordination profile. So you would have noticed in this round of reporting that the work plan name has been changed to the annual coordination framework. This change has been made in order for us to ensure that we're able to understand the right purposes of the data that we're entering, and also not to get the data that we're collecting in the IMS confused with data that we used to collect for earlier on due to historical purposes. So this is one of the main changes for this. So I hope. I think we only had one email where a colleague was confused because they couldn't see the work plan because the name had been changed. So we hope that if not all of you, most of you do have access to the handbook, which did mention these changes. And then, of course, linked to the annual coordination framework, the former work plan, we used to have what we call the annual letter to the Secretary General. And we have changed the name of that to the strategic summary of coordination results, because again, in effect, is to ensure that we have clarity of the data that's been collected. So this letter is being collected as a summary of the results of the UN country teams. So we have tried to ensure that this name is linked in with the purposes of the data collected. So we hope that this hasn't caused too much confusion because we made this very clear in the handbook. It was one of the first sections of the handbook. And then So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Anna, who is going to really take you into the key aspects of the handbook, and then we'll walk you through data entry as well as data quality, and then we'll come back to rounding up later on. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you. All right, I'm taking over from here, and I will give you a quick overview of the annual reporting handbook, because we strongly advise you to look at it if you have not done so. We have put a lot of effort into it, and it's really helpful for answering most of the questions that we have received so far via email. So it consists of 3 chapters. The first one is the guidance note, which gives you all the over information you basically need already before you start data entry. It informs you about the timeline of the reporting period and of the purpose, why you are reporting, the key elements, what you're reporting on, which data is made public, and also gives you an overview of the different steps of data entry. The second chapter is the FAQ, which I will come back to in a second. And the third chapter is about accessing the data. It gives you an overview about the report builder, which is the analytical tool of the IMS, which helps you doing very quick analysis of the data, and it's very helpful. And we strongly advise UNCTs also to be using it, because it's much quicker to use this function rather than downloading the Excel sheets and doing the analysis by yourself. So coming back to the second chapter, the FAQ, it's split into 2 sections. First of all, giving Vary an overview of any basic questions we have received so far, about how do you complete the submission and the validation of the annual coordination framework and the coordination profile, general questions, technical questions, like how do I reset my password, like all those questions we have received so far. And then it's the second section is what we strongly advise you to have a look at while you're doing your data entry, because this gives additional information that is not available in the IMS, but that is relevant for answering questions correctly. Or it might not be relevant, but we have seen in the past that some UNCTs have filled in those fields incorrectly. So we just gave additional information in this handbook now that you should look at to ensure that you fill in the data correctly. And I've given here some examples. For instance, for the general profile, which is the first section of the coordination profile, there is a question about the representative title. And then it says in parentheses, choose one, if other, please specify. So you have a pre-selected answer options. However, these are not exclusive. And we have received a couple of emails asking the title that is relevant in this case is not available. So what you can do is that you can type into the field the answer option that is correct in your case, and then you have to click enter. This is something, it's not very intuitive, because it just says if other, please specify, and there is no extra field. So you have to write it into the same field and then click enter. So just for those things that are not for everyone intuitive, it gives additional information, this handbook you can look at. To give more examples in the same profile, in the general profile, you are asked about the 15 standard operating procedures. And for instance, in the case of standard operation procedure 15, which is about country communications groups, perfect, yeah. Sorry. And for standard operating procedure number 15, you in the same section of the coordination profile, you're prior to being asked about the SOPs, they are asking you about the results groups and interagency groups. And there you can tag functional area communications and advocacy. And if you have selected this as that you have an interagency group focusing on this, then in this case you also have to click yes that you have a standard operating procedure 15 in place, whether it's impartially or fully implemented, but you have something in place. You can't have selected functional area communications and advocacy as a results group and then say that you don't have any standard that you don't have any country communications group in place. So this is just because we point this out, because this has been done wrongly by a lot of UNCTs last year. And then to give one last example, in the next coordination profile, the coordination capacity profile, you have to give the staff member titles of the RCO staff members, and there are different options provided. However, these are only coordination analysts at P2 level, coordination analysts at P3 level, at P4 level, etc. So these are not very precise, and we have received a lot of emails also on this, asking what to enter here. So basically, you just pick the option that comes closest to what is correct for you in this case, and then you have the option coming a few questions later on, asking for the main areas of responsibility. And here you have the possibility, the option to specify further, because you can choose, for instance, monitoring and evaluation, lots of other options, and you also have the option others, where you can again specify if the answer option that is most relevant in your case is not being available. Now we come to data entry. Basically, here we have summed up a few questions that we have received in the past weeks. First of all, overall question we have received is why are RCO and UNCT no longer available answer options? So this is something that is not new. We have changed that already last year. And the reason is that we use all the data available in the IMS, all the data you fill in, we are analyzing. And if you only fill in RCO, we have 131 countries where we have individually to look into, okay, what are the members of the RCO? And this would be too much time consuming, and we don't have the capacities. So we know it's a lot of effort for you to fill in individually always the UNCT members. And we apologize for this. However, you would do a lot of, it's very important that that you fill in all the agencies individually. Secondly, we now have IOM available as answer option because this has officially joined the UN system, and therefore it's now being available. And thirdly, you have noticed that some of the fields are being auto-loaded every year, so you don't have to put the effort to fill in the same data again and again. However, some of the information that you have filled in the past year might have changed. So please always ensure that you update the data correctly. And specifically for the annual coordination framework, we have received a question that what to do if the data is not yet available, if you don't have the data at hand before the reporting period ends. And in this case, please just let the field blank and send an email, a message to the regional coordinator to inform him that you have not the data available yet. And as soon as you have the data available, please fill it in. Then secondly, now we have the option that you can download already the draft version of the annual coordination framework of your country. That has, we have received the question to be able to do this because it seems to be useful to have an overlook already before you have fully submitted the data. You can go through your draft and ensure that everything is correct. And then lastly, the validation. The validation for the annual coordination framework is a little bit different to the coordination profile, because in the coordination profile you save and submit, whereas in the annual coordination framework you first have to save and submit and then re-enter into the annual coordination framework and then click on validation. However, we strongly, the validation should not be done by the same person who entered the data, but it should be done by somebody else. Then for the coordination profile, like I just mentioned, you have to save and submit. A lot of UNCTs have only clicked on save and next or save and continue, but if you click on this, you're not submitting the coordination profile sections. You have to go on every coordination profile section individually and click on save and submit to fully submit the coordination profile. And then if you fill in the standard operating procedures, also something very important is that you click on the hover text. Because for all the standard operating procedures, you have 3 answer options: no, partially implemented, and fully implemented. And it's absolutely necessary for you to be able to judge whether you have only partially or fully implemented the SOP, and to carefully read the explanations that we are providing in the hover text. Then also here you are uploading quite a few documents in the coordination profile. They're usually auto-loaded. However, if something has changed, please update a new document. And then one more point is that we went through all the data you have entered and have analyzed it. And one thing came to our mind, to our attention, which is in the section Common Country Program Profile, you are reporting on the UNDAF budget. And we have received very odd numbers. Like, for instance, Guyana filled in 30. And basically, the number you fill in, it's not in millions, it's not in 1,000s. It's just if you fill in 30, it means $30. And this is just impossible. And you can see it has not been only done by Guyana, also not only by 2 countries, but there were quite a few countries that have filled in a very odd number. And yeah, coming to the next slide is talking again. Now, I mean, the previous example was an example already that some of the data is definitely not accurate so far. And we have had this problem quite a lot regarding the financial data that is filled in the annual coordination framework. And basically, it's wrong to an extent that it's for now useless, but we definitely want to improve it. And therefore, it's very important that you pay a lot of attention to this section. And we have also much information on this in the annual coordination handbook. However, just to give you a quick overview about what are the main points you have to focus on, is the first thing that you look at is the budget source that you have to fill in. In the drop-down list that you can see on the screen, you can't see all of them. Most of them are on the right-hand side, where it starts with civil society, CSA, donor, national, etc. Those are all the available answer options. So the ones that we are most interested in are the ones circled in red, because those are the funds that are part of the UNDG cost sharing. So these are the funds provided through DOCO and refer to the UNDG cost sharing funds, and the SRC, the UNCCF, and the UNDG cost sharing. So if whatever funds, those part of the budget you have received from DOCO in December 2016, where you have received an email sent out by us informing you about the money you would receive. It's usually between 60,000 and 120,000, and this money is coded with 1 or 2 of the 3 codes that you can see here circled in red. And those are the ones that correspond to coordination, which is the next field you have to fill in, which is the budget type. So those 3 fund codes, you have always, if you click one of these, you always have to click coordination as budget type. And one more thing, please, if you say that you have received a budget, if you spent a budget, please don't leave the budgeted amount blank, because we know only the budget source is made mandatory until now, but please also fill in the budget information. If you don't have it available yet, fill it in as soon as you know it. And coming to the next slide is giving you an overview of the different activities that fall under coordination, fall under joint implementation, and fall under others, which are the 3 answer options of the budget type. I'm just quickly rushing through this now, since this information is available in the annual reporting handbook. Just giving you as an example for the budget type filter coordination. For instance, part of it is funds for the design planning of joint UNCT activities, which could be the support to national coordination systems and processes, or development and management of shared operational support services. Then for the budget type filter, joint implementation, you have, for instance, costs associated with implementing activities under the standard operating procedures. This could be, for instance, implementing the activities within the business operation strategy or results groups. Then coming to the next slide, it's for the budget filter type others, what falls under it is, for example, UN dispensary, costs related to security or common services. And just to bring it one more time to your attention, common mistakes that are being made is if you clicked one of the three corresponding budget sources, budget funds that are corresponding to the UNDG cost sharing, staff costs don't fall under the UNDG cost sharing, as well as innovation funds don't fall under the UNDG cost sharing, just to bring it to your attention, because we have noted budget sources, there was some reported budget sources that are definitely not coming from the UNDG cost sharing, but still made it seem like it. And also, all data, all budget source, all money you report in the IMS, it's always US dollar as currency. Sometimes the numbers are so much off that we assume that you have not used US dollar as currency. Coming to the next slide. This is just to give you an overview how far off some of the data is in the annual coordination framework. Because on the left-hand side, you see the actual GOE allocation, the actual budget source you have received, the countries received from the UNDG cost sharing. For example, Indonesia 50,000, Jamaica, Iraq has received 120,000, and then on the right-hand side, you can see the money that was reported on having received as cost-sharing fund. And you can see some of the countries are completely off. Like Jamaica actually has received 50,000, but then they reported on sources more than 160,000. And there has only been one country that filled in the exact amount. All the other countries were off. And coming to my last slide, you can see here, just give you one more example of what was reported by Benin on the different activities. There was, for instance, on one activity for organizing of 2 enough outcome reviews, a budget of 371,000. However, under the SRC fund, you can only, you can only report on the budget you have received from the UNDG cost sharing, which is much less than 370,000, just to give you one more example. Now I hand over back to Abigail.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for going through that detail and giving those examples. And basically, I'm just going to wrap up now by reminding you of the deadline. So the deadline is 15th of February. And also just to note that there are no extensions to this deadline because we have several things that have to happen to the data. We have to go through a validation process here, which is led by DOCO, which we started last year. We'll be doing the same this year, of course, working closely with you and all the other colleagues in the UN cities to ensure that we continue to get the data to high quality standards. So just to remind you of the deadline. So now we're basically going to open up the floor for all your questions. We know you probably have quite a lot, so we wanted to leave quite a bit of time for that. I just ask that please type your questions in the chat, and when you do so, please type your name and please type the country. Please type your country so that we're just able to gauge where the questions are coming from. So the floor is now open for all your questions. Please go ahead and type them in the chat, and we're ready to take all of them. Thank you. Okay, so we're still waiting. We're just looking at the question box. We haven't seen anything come up yet. So we are just waiting to see. And maybe while I'm waiting for while we're waiting for questions to come up, just to say you can ask questions on what we've presented, and you can ask questions of your own that you have. You can ask questions of any difficulty you have in terms of entering the data, or technical questions that you have that you maybe haven't sent to us yet, that we haven't responded to. So don't be shy. We are waiting. We're here to take all your questions. I know we ran through the presentation very quickly, but that was deliberately so that we can leave time for your questions. We really wanted to focus this webinar and make it more practical to take your questions. Okay, so we see there's a delay in the question box, so we can now see there are quite a few questions that have come in. So we'll start taking them one by one. So the first question is from Mongolia, and the question is, where staff costs come from? In the email we receive, it's under the UNDG cost sharing. Secondly, RCO leads communications and M&E groups. Without RCO or RC option, how should we report a lead agency? Okay, so maybe I'll start by taking your first question. So, and I think you're already answering your question. So the critical finger is lead agency. So, for example, if you put in RCO or UNCT, that's an aggregation of the agencies and everyone else that you're working with on the ground. So what happens is we are unable to analyze the data because RCO does not tell us which agencies you're working with on the ground and which agencies are leading. So that's why it is important that when entering this data, you have to choose the agency, specifically choose each agency that you're working with. I know some of you are working with a number of agencies, and this question takes you some time, but it is critical that you are able to indicate which agencies, because then we're able to disaggregate to do the analysis to say, okay, for example, in Mongolia, we have 10 agencies and UNDP and UNICEF are leading or chairing specific groups. So this is one of the reasons why you cannot enter UNCT or RCO. And then on your first question, it was I didn't quite get the point in your first question saying in the email we receive it falls under UNDG cost sharing. So maybe you may want to clarify that question because it's not very clear what the question actually is. So maybe we'll come, so Mongolia, maybe you want to rephrase that question and we'll come back to that, and we'll take the second question in the chat. The second question is from Marie Sandra Lennon from Benin, and the question is, for the coordination profile, on the question whether the UNCT has a gender advisor, does it have to be specific position of a gender advisor, or can it be, for instance, the team leader in governance at UNDP acting for the UNCT? That's a very good question. In fact, we had a meeting just last week with our coordination colleagues at UN Women. We were looking at specifically the gender questions.
Yeah, I think, right?
Yeah. Go back here. Did you click on this and see? Yeah. Okay. Can you hear us now? We're trying to get the speaker working. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Colleagues, if you're still online, can you hear us?
Yes,
We
I
just
can.
tried to. Okay, we really apologize for this. We basically, the speaker just froze and the computer screen froze. So we lost all connection with you. And we apologize for this, but we've tried to fix the speaker again. So it's good to know that you can hear us. So we will stay another 10-15 minutes to ensure that we continue to take your questions. So we're just trying to figure out where we were before. And seeing as you lost 10 minutes, I think the last question was from Nigeria, right? Okay, so let's take another one.
There's no voice.
Still no voice?
No, that's the old comments.
Okay.
They have all left. Left.
Okay, scroll down. Scroll down.
If we scroll down, they all. Oh, very good.
Okay, so now that we're back online, the speaker is back on. We have a question from Asma in Libya, and it's quite a long question, so maybe I'll take them one by one. The first one is, how can we report on the outputs stroke activities led by the RCO if the system does not allow us to select it as a leading agency? I managed to do it last year, but not this year. Asma, I don't think you were able to do this last year. I think you were able to do this the previous year. So in the first year when the IMS was implemented, there was definitely the option to choose RCO and UNCT. However, based on the fact that there was a lot of difficulty to do any analysis of that data, the decision was taken by DOCO that RCO and UNCT will be removed from the metadata list, and we will just have the agencies. So as I explained already before in one of the questions I already answered, RCO is an aggregation of the agencies working on the ground. I mean, here I think you're saying the RCO is leading. So I think maybe this is something we need to look at moving forward. But for now, RCO and UNCT are not there because there is an aggregation and we cannot do any analysis because we need disaggregated data in order to be able to do any analysis. Then the second question also from you is, we cannot report on the activities of the different UN missions, UNIMAS, for the same outputs of activity, since it allows you to choose UN mission only once. Sometimes I manage to write it under partners, but not all of the time. So the one of the key responses to this is, we have a definitive list of UNDG members. So the UNDG is made up of 32, 34 agencies, but we have those that are members and observers, and those that are members and observers are definitely listed within the metadata list for the UN agencies. So the ones that are not listed there are not official members of UNDGs. For example, we had the issue of IOM before. IOM was not officially part of the UN, and so therefore was not part of the UNDG. Therefore, we could not enter IOM as an agency before. However, last September, IOM has now become a member of UNDG, and we have now added that. So in response to your questions, the agencies that are not within that drop-down menu, they are not official members of the UNDG, and we have to keep the list to those that are members and observers of the UNDG. So I hope that responds to that question. And then your third question is, why can't we choose partners under the activities level? you can't choose partners under the activities level. I think maybe this is something we need to look at, because I know within the annual coordination framework, there is the option for you to say who the partners are. So I'm not very clear on this question. So maybe you want to send an email directly to us and be more specific and to give more clarity to that question, because definitely you are able to choose partners within the annual coordination framework as part of entering your data. And then the final question is, what kind of files or documents can we attach regarding the good practice question? I think within the annual coordination framework, the opportunity to upload documents is not there at all. So what we ask is, when you have specified an activity, then you have the option to choose, is it a good practice? So what happens is, when we start analyzing the data and we see several good practices, then we can maybe further contact you to say, do you have extra information for that good practice that you identified? So there are no fields within the annual coordination framework for uploads. It's all entered within the data field. So so unfortunately, you're not able to upload anything, but maybe this is something we would look at moving forward. Okay, and then there's a question from Sergio, and we don't know where Sergio is sitting, but could you please explain in more detail the validation process? Okay, so once we've hit the deadline, which is February 15th, after February 15th, here in DOCO, we have several colleagues who are obviously the technical experts within their area. So for example, we'll have the program team take the lead in looking at the responses to the SOPs from all the 131 country teams. We'll have the human rights team looking at the human rights data, and so on. And then what will happen is, we will try to go through it and eyeball specifically things that we can validate at HQ level, because it's not every piece of data that we can validate at HQ level. So the ones that we know we can, we will go through those, and where we see inconsistency or something is incorrect, then we will write to you at the UNCT to say, we've noticed this and we think the data entry is incorrect, and we will ask you to go back in and correct that data. So we will be doing that for all 131 UNCTs and for all the different sets of data that we can validate at HQ level. So I hope that responds to that for you. And then we have a question from Esther Almeida, and we don't know where Esther is sitting. You haven't identified, but the question is, what is the information to be included in the letter to the SG? Don't remember the new name. Is it only a summary of the IMS report, or shall we include also relevant UNDAF results? Esther, I would say you go through, when you're doing your reporting back on your 2016 plan, there's the tab, which is, there's a specific tab there for the letter, and there are questions in there. So I would say you take your time and go through the questions, and what you need to respond to is those specific questions that are asked in there. So for example, one of the questions is, what have you achieved as a UNCT in terms of your joint work? So the questions are very specific. So this letter you have to obviously write to in collaboration with your RC and other colleagues in the office. So the questions are very specific. I would suggest you go in and have a look at them. And if you have questions related to any of the questions themselves, then you can send us an email where you're not clear. I hope this responds. So it's not a summary of the IMS report, but these are specific questions that we've asked you to do with human rights, to do with your joined up work, for example. And then we're just trying to see if there are any more questions. There are no more questions in the chat at the moment. And again, we apologize, but we just basically lost our connection through our computer and the microphone. So we didn't realize that we were speaking for 10 minutes and you couldn't hear us. So we will hang around for another 5, 10, more minutes or so. If there are more questions, we'll continue to take them so that we can make up for the 10-minute gap that we lost you. Okay, so there is a question from Rebecca in Tanzania. Hello, Rebecca. And the question was asked already, but the answer is not 100% clear to me. Regarding data entry and lead agency, if RCO is already there by default, is it because the data was taken over from last year? Is it because the data was taken over from last year? RCO can no longer be chosen as a lead agency, or is RCO in the fact that entity implementing the activity, which agency shall we choose as lead agency? Okay, I think in the section that Anna presented, she talked about the autofill. So, for example, in the first year that colleagues were able to choose RCO and UNCT as a metadata option, that data was already within the section. So then what happens the next year is those fields are autofilled, right? So if you don't go back and change it, then it will continue to appear in your data that you already entered that first year. So even though the choice wasn't there for you to choose RCO and UNCT last year and this time around, it might still be within your data entry from the last one, and because some fields are auto-populated, it definitely auto-populates it. So that's one response to that question that you're asking. So what we ask is that colleagues you can go back. That's why Anna was saying in the fields that autofill, we do ask that you go back and ensure that the data is accurate and correct this time around. Because the autofilled mechanism is to ensure you don't keep entering data every year because it might be the same, but where it has changed, and in this and for the purposes where metadata is no longer available, you can no longer choose that. We obviously ask that you go back and clean those that data within those fields before you submit your data. So and I think that responds to that. And usually when we ask for lead agency, there's usually an agency that is leading on specific issues. So I hope that answers your question, and if not, then send us an email and we can clarify a little bit more. And now there's a question from Pedro Henrique Souza, again from Brazil. And the question is, we are now, I think we already responded.
Yeah, but you didn't hear because.
Oh, yes, you didn't hear because you are lost connection. So we're going to repeat that question. We are now implementing results groups. We will still have some thematic groups functioning, but the work plans of the thematic groups will be included in the work plans of the results group. However, the IMS requests to upload both work plans, thematic groups, and results groups. How should we proceed? So I think what I responded to this last time, and unfortunately we lost connection, is those fields where we ask you to upload within the results group, they are not mandatory fields. So my suggestion is where you have the information to upload it. Where you don't have the information at the moment, because the fields are not mandatory, then you don't have to you can just ignore that, move forward to your next profile, save and submit that one, and move to your next profile, because those fields are actually not mandatory. The only areas where you will have problems is where the field is mandatory and you are unable to upload. But those areas where we ask for the results groups and thematic groups, they are not mandatory fields. So upload what you have, and what you don't have, that's fine. If you have it at a later date, you can always return back to upload it and then save and submit your profile again. So that would be my advice to you on that question. And then we have a question from Marie Sandra Lenan from Benin. Again, because we lost the connection. The question is, For the coordination profile, on the question whether the UNCT has a gender advisor, does it have to be a specific position of a gender advisor, or can it be, for instance, a team leader in governance at UNDP? So no, it cannot be the team leader for governance at UNDP. It has to be a specific gender advisor for the UNCT. And if you, in that question, there's a hover text. So if you look at the hover text, it gives you exactly the explanation of what we mean when we ask for a gender advisor. So my response is, the second part of the question, definitely no. It's the first part. It has to be a specific gender advisor. I hope that clarifies that now for you. And then we have a question from Milika from Serbia. My question was not answered. Where to find draft of coordination profile that can be printed? Your question is not very clear. I don't know what you mean by draft of coordination profile to be printed. I think maybe you're meaning where can you see your full coordination profile? And the options are there for you to either export the data as an Excel, or you can look if you go into the dashboard, the option is there for you to click and you can see everything in a printable screen of your coordination profile. And if you're having technical problems with this, send us an email and we can send you screenshots of how you do this.
And what was mentioned during the presentation is that there's a draft available of the annual coordination framework. That is what we were talking during the presentation.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Okay, there's a question from Ashma Jamil. We don't know where you're sitting, but your question is, we don't have budgets available for 2017. Okay, so what we've said, you can always return back to your 2017 annual coordination framework because it's your planning. You can always return to it to enter your data. But what we're looking for is your 2016 reporting now, that you have to definitely ensure that that is completed by the 15th of February. You definitely have to do that. But in terms of your 2017 planning, if you don't have all the information and data available now, it's not so much of a problem. You can always return back and enter that data later. But of course, we ask that you don't leave it until September, October this year. But as soon as you get the information, go back and validate the plan, enter the data, and submit and validate it again. So that would be my advice to you for your 2017 plan. And then one last question we have here. Where do I find this teleconference recorded? We had technical difficulties and missed an important part of it. Okay, so the webinar is being recorded. So sometime in the next few days, we'll have the recording available. And everything to do with the IMS is available in the IMS support page. I don't know, Anna, if you're able to go in and log into the IMS. If we can, maybe we can't. But there is the IMS support page, which is the page that you see in your login. When you're logging in, there is support page. Every documentation, every webinar, all the trainings we conducted in September, all the webinars we've run before, you can see. I hope you can see the screen. Anna is showing the screen now, so there you are. So you'll be able to find this webinar uploaded there. But there are other webinars already there, which are also training webinars that can able to help you in terms of your technical questions that you have, also in terms of how to enter the data. So that's where you'll find it. So we'll definitely make the recording available. So we're going to see if it's 9:10 now, so we'll take one last question if there's any question. Okay, so we see in the chat there are no more questions, so we will now wrap up this webinar and we will make the recording available to you later on. So just to say thank you to you all for your time. Have a good evening to those of you already coming to the end of your day. Good afternoon. Have a good afternoon to those of you who are already halfway through your day, and good morning. Have a good day to those colleagues who are only starting the day like we are here in New York. Thank you.